enums are not passed by reference.
I mean, I tried every trick in the book.
Every trick in the book. All right, let's take a look at that problem, and then we'll see if we can find a solution. Okay. All right. So I will start up my. Well, there's a new version of ADT released. So if you have not done so, you might want to update your installation. But don't do it yet. Let me do it first. In case I step on something, you guys know. Okay, let's not do that.
Well, make sure you have a backup.
If Eclipse updates your Android plugin, you have to update.
Yeah.
So.
All right. So here's the update. I did this last night already because I have 2 installations of Android development tools. So I did one first, and it was okay, and then now I'm fairly confident as long as it is still the same version, this will be okay. But this one fixed one of the problems that we were observing, of the menu GUI thing not working. This one seemed to fix it. So this is version 22.6.2 seems to fix the problem. And it still had other issues, related to not being able to handle nested XML items for drawable, objects, but that's a separate issue. It looks like the tool itself. Okay, it's working.
22.62. 6.2.
Yep. See, 22.6.2 is now available, so I can go ahead and install these, and then after this, it will ask me to install the corresponding tool, the plugin.
Do they have a change log?
Sorry?
Do they have a change log?
I would imagine so. But I did this yesterday at home, and it worked out quite well.
Did it stay like that? Because there's always every once in a while, hey, it works. No, it doesn't.
Yep, I remember that. Seems to do okay. The focus of today's class, is kind of go over what we talked about last time, but this time I'll give you actual sample code because the computer is up and running, and we're still dealing with simple static drawing, because Eclipse is really updated right now. I can't do much about Eclipse. So what I do want to do is to kind of go to the bottom part here first, because I think this part is actually important in our understanding of how Android works, how most GUI type of programs work. So what we'll do is to go over this part, and I'll just keep an eye on Android update. Okay, so it's going to install stuff, so we can kind of safely go back to here first. All right. So what we talked about here, today, and also kind of we started last week, was how to do custom drawing in 2 dimensions. You can do fairly fancy stuff if you want to. You can draw lines, circles, rectangles, text, and so on and so forth. So if you want to plot, let's say, a graph, out of some data, you can do so. I mean, this gives you enough API to do all that stuff. Okay, so now it wants to make sure that I update the Eclipse also. So let me handle this part first. So while it's updating, we can go back and talk about the main concept. So the Eclipse itself would complain, must be available in order, no Java virtual machine was found. Oh, that's because I moved it. But the new version doesn't seem to require that anymore, so I can just go ahead and remove these 2 lines.
So you're So you're putting in the path manually?
Right. Because at first we thought it was the version of Java that was causing the problem, and as it turned out, it was not. It was actually the ADT itself that was causing the problem, because the new installation, straight from Sun, also had similar issues.
You mean Oracle?
Oracle. Yep.
You said Sun.
Oh. Okay. Previously Sun. Okay, so right now, because it's still running the old version, you can see the menu elements or Android menu GUI is still not working. So after I update this, it should work. Well, you have to restart Eclipse, and then we'll start to work again. should automatically restart everything. And do you see how fast it runs? Even from an external hard drive connected by USB 2.0. When I tried this, in Windows, it was not even close to this speed. All right, so it's should be there. Oh, okay, it's still not working here. But when I tried it at home, it was already working. So it must be. See, this one works now. So I think with the other one, it's just because I was over there to begin with. So if I refresh the screen by going away to somewhere else and then come back to this one. Okay, close it first. Let's see if it does it. Yep, that works. Very mysteriously.
It's a little flaky.
Yep, just a little, yes. Nothing is more life-threatening than a flaky Android. So anyway, getting back to here, I want to finish this part first. Okay, so this part, kind of brings in, how most GUI programs work, and that means it does not apply only to Android. It also applies to Visual Basic. It applies to just about any type of program that has a graphical user interface where the program is waiting for the user to do something. Okay, and what it does is the user or your application in Android has one main thread. In other words, it has one particular thing that is running all the time, okay, as opposed to multiple threads that are running all the time. So there's one main thread that is executing a code or a program that looks like this. Okay, this is really just for illustration purposes, and it doesn't exactly look like this. This is called a message queue, handling type of logic. You can see that it's in a tight loop. While true something means that it's not going to get out of the loop. This is an infinite loop. And inside we have only two statements. The first statement gets a message out of a queue, which is a FIFO, a first in, first out type of construct. And it's a blocking call, which means if the queue object has no messages at the time, it will just block the thread. The thread will be put into like a suspension state. Okay, it will suspend and not take up any execution time until the queue has at least one item filled in, and then it will unblock so that the line 3 will get a message object out of the queue, and then on line 4, the dispatch message. What it does is you can kind of consider that as a switch statement. So it will look at the message and look at who's supposed to get the message, and it will trigger the correct on whatever event listener call of the correct object to handle that particular message. Are we doing okay so far with the concept? Yep.
Then it's two separate threads?
No, that's only one thread.
Because if the thread is suspended, how can it be checking for new messages?
The messages are coming in through the operating system itself. It's through the rest of Android. So there's one thread dedicated to your application. If I want to draw a picture, it would look like this. So basically, you have remember the lane diagrams in the UML. Okay, so you have your own. Okay, this is your own app. Okay, as a single thread. So what it does is it will go to a certain point, and it will suspend itself because it goes to line 3, where you're trying to get the next message out of the queue, but there's nothing there, right? So it will suspend itself, and then here is the Android system. The Android system has its own threads, not just one, but it has multiple processes. Yeah. So the Android system is really quote unquote running at the same time the whole time. So the Android system is really running the entire time. And let's say this is the user at this with this lane. So the end user is the one thing that is outside of the system that is not a part of the system. So the user doesn't do anything until maybe now. Okay, so the user clicks on something. So this click will trigger the operating system to handle that particular event and go, okay, somebody just clicked on something on the screen. the Android system will go through the hierarchy of objects related to your app to figure out who is at that location at the front part, so that it knows which object is supposed to get the message. So at that point, the Android system will do some processing, and after the Android system does its own processing, it will come back here and basically say, okay, here's another message to put into your queue. So that's why you are correct. There are multiple threads at work here, but as far as your app is concerned, it is still only one thread. So during this entire time, it is just doing nothing. It's just sitting there. The thread is using up memory, but it's not using execution time at all.
Okay, so it comes in your own app, then suspends if there's no messages.
Right.
Then it just waits there until it gets a response from Android system to wake up?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep.
So it's an external wake, not just its own process waking up.
That is correct. Now, it might have a mechanism to wake itself up based on time. Okay, there might be a timer object where you can set up a time, because it is fairly often that a multi-threading API would give you an interface to say that, okay, I need to wake up in 500 milliseconds. So the thread can schedule its own wake up time. So that is possible too, but it is really done using this way too, because what happens in that case is your app, before it goes to sleep, it is asking the Android system to say, wake me up in 500 milliseconds. And it is still done by a message mechanism where the system, after 500 milliseconds, will send a message back to your own app and say, okay, you told me to wake you up in 500 milliseconds. 500 milliseconds has passed, wake up. So it is still, as far as you are concerned, you still only have one thread.
Okay.
Now, the question is, what happens at this point? When your thread gets a message and wakes up, then it will get past line 3. Line 3 is just responsible to say, okay, I'm going to wait until something is sent to me as a message. Line 4 is the one that is quote unquote dispatching the message. Message dispatching is nothing more than figuring out, okay, which object is supposed to get the message, and then let that particular on whatever event handler deal with that particular message. So we have done a few of these event listener already. On-click is one. It's fairly common with a button to have an on-click method. We have on-touch, on touchdown, and so on and so forth. So we have all of these different types of event listeners that can receive messages and do some processing. So what do you think happens after your event handler or your event listener has done this processing? Just look at the control structure here. It goes back to while true, and since true is always true, it cannot get out of the loop. It goes back onto line 3 and it sits there and waits for another message again. Okay. This works well as long as you have a application that is kind of interactive in a way where you do something, the app does something to respond to your clicking, your interaction, and then it comes back and it just sits there and wait for something, wait for you to do something else, and meanwhile it doesn't have anything to do. Okay, so if you're dealing with online banking, it kind of goes in, fits this particular model, except for timing out and log you off for security reasons, but that can be done by a timer. In other words, your application, every time you're done with doing something, it will send a message, or it will set up the system to say, wake me up in, let's say 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever amount of time it's supposed to wait for before it logs you out automatically. But what about games? Think about games, and think about does it fit into this particular model? Let's think about Angry Birds, okay, because everybody kind of knows what Angry Birds is about. Okay, so with Angry Birds, even when you are not doing anything, does the screen update with certain things, animation and stuff like that? It does, right? With most games it does. Okay, so the question now is, well, if you are not doing anything, if the user, you, is not doing anything, what is going to trigger your application to do anything? The timeout, okay, you can set up a timer. But then you have to set up a timer to wake yourself up every 10 milliseconds, 20 milliseconds, to get the frame rate, frame rate to go, at, a reasonable level, which is not impossible. Okay, you can do that. Okay, you can basically, in your app, you will set up, every time you think you're done with something, you just set up a timer and say, wake me up in 20, 30, 40 milliseconds, so that 30 milliseconds later you wake up and you do some more processing, like screen animation or whatever, and then you go back to sleep. But think about the logic of your program. What would it look like if you have to chop up your logic and say, okay, I'm doing a little bit of processing and then I'm waiting, and then when you come back, you're not resuming to the point where you set up the wait. You are beginning all over again on, let's say, on timer expired, okay, as an event handle. Okay, it can be done, but it's definitely not going to be easy to continue with processing. Okay, so that's why this particular model is only useful, or suitable for programs where you do something, you trigger the program to do something, the program responds to whatever you want to do, and then there's nothing else to do. In other words, during this time, okay, where's my pen? Right here. During this time, the user does not expect anything to happen. There's nothing to update on the screen. There's no animation. There's nothing. Okay. If your game requires constant logic to be executing during this time, this would not be the right model. In other words, if you want to do any type of game where if you don't do anything, something will happen and you get killed in the game. You don't want to use a single thread. Basically, what you want is a secondary thread, at least one more thread, to perform the logic that needs to be performed all the time. And then the UI thread is only responsible to handle the clicks, the drags, and all the other user interaction. So we will talk about how to deal with games that are far more interactive. But in order to get there, we also have to talk about threading first. What is a thread, and how do all different threads interact with each other? So that's why we will not talk about it today. But I just want to bring this up because we want to understand the limitations of this particular way of doing custom graphics, because it is good, it's okay, but it is not enough to write games. Are there any questions about this? Yep.
Do most games require like some use of like some sort of engine, like this proprietary engines that like graphics engine?
I think a lot of games can use the built-in 3D capabilities of Android, but I don't know whether they have any type of 3D rendering engines like with desktop games. That I do not know. They probably do. I would imagine that they have some sort of 3D engine, just like with desktop computers, because it really is just a miniaturized, PC. So I cannot imagine why it does not have a 3D engine.
Because I heard it's actually hard to kind of, do you think it's feasible to do it without, tools like the 3D engines?
It has OpenGL. Yeah, Android has an interface to directly interact with OpenGL. So you can place 3D objects in space and control the lighting and all the other stuff yourself. But as far as the physics is concerned, because a lot of game engines, they go way beyond just 3D rendering, but they also deal with a lot of the other logic that games require, like trajectories and physics and stuff like that. So that part I'm not sure whether it has any established game engines. Right. So are there any questions about this part, or everything that we have talked about so far? Okay, nothing. Okay. Okay. Remember last time, or well, not last time, but a few times before that, we had we had a few calls to update the text in a text view, and we traced the program. We single step through those particular calls. But nothing happened on the app. Do you guys still remember that? Okay. What happened was, when you are drawing something, when you're updating the screen, it is not directly updating the screen itself. What it is doing when you are quote unquote updating the text inside a text view is your handler is actually sending back messages to itself to update the screen. So the screen updates are basically done by messaging as well. Your on-click listener, when it's updating a text view item object, it is actually sending your application another message and say, oh, text view object so and so, you need to update yourself in the next cycle. In other words, in the next time we go to line 3, it will pick up, eventually it will pick up the message to say, update text view content to this string. So that's why we did not see any updates while we make that call. How many people still kind of remember that part? Okay, and what invalidate does is to kind of trigger that operation like right away. It's like, okay, go through the message queue and find out what we have to repaint right now. So that's why that's another reason why this is not a very good way to write games, because whatever you want to update on the screen cannot happen in the same cycle. It has to wait until the next few cycles when that update message is actually picked up by line 3, or what is equivalent to line 3 in the big loop of your application. Are there any questions about the limitations of what I have just talked about here? Questions? All right. If there are no questions about this, and Android is done updating itself, now we can go ahead and go back a little bit and find out, how do we draw something on screen? Draw something that is under our control. Okay, that's the whole point, is doing something that's under our control. And can we interact with that something? Okay, how do we interact with a screen or view where we have done something custom to it? Okay, so this is what we'll do next. Everything starts with a view, okay? Because in this case, a view is a very basic class in the Android hierarchy. If you just go to the documentation of the view object or the view class, you will see that view has a lot of subclasses, and many of these we already are familiar with, like the text view, and it also has a lot of indirect subclasses. It doesn't look like a long list here, but look at this part here. Okay, let me just kind of magnify the screen so we can see a little better. Okay, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 subclasses doesn't sound like too bad. I mean, they are indirect subclasses, which means they are not children. They are grandchildren or beyond your grandchildren. But look at this part here, and 57 others. Okay, and if you click on 57 others, you will find buttons. You will find just about anything that you can interact with is a subclass of a view. So the sole concept of a view is really a foundation class for anything that can be displayed on screen and can respond to touches and other types of events. Okay, are there any questions about this part here? In Windows programming, a quote-unquote window is corresponding to a view in Android programming. So if you guys are into Windows GUI programming, it is called quote-unquote a window in Windows programming. And that's why the operating system or the GUI is called Windows, because it is just composites of windows upon each other. I'm going to click on this button here, or click on this link, just so that we can get a quick view of what, see, button is here, checkbox is here. We'll just go ahead and pick some really common ones. Edit text is here. Let's see. Horizontal scroll view, image button, okay, which means it's just a button, but it is based on the image instead of text. List view. So basically everything, if I go back to here and go to layout and look at the GUI tool, basically every form widget, every text field, every layout, composite, and so on, they are all basically specialized views. Okay, all right. So now that we know everything is derived from the class view, what can it do? Okay, so let's collapse this list here because it's really long and kind of getting in the way. So we'll click here. And even with that collapsed, you can see that the description of view as a class is really, really long. Okay, if I scroll, you can see, okay, do you see the scroll bar moving at all? Well, that kind of tells you how big of a class it is, because it is a huge class. Okay, now with this huge class, obviously today we're not going to talk about every single thing they can do with a view, because you can probably find out, when you need to, and look up the document and find out, okay, but how do we do something like that? We have a paint class. The paint class is basically, analogous to a paint to paint when you're actually drawing something on paper. It just controls, it can control the color and the transparency. We talked about this last week. The canvas class is somewhat of a misnomer, because a canvas is not really just a canvas. It is actually supplying a set of tools where you can use those tools and say, I want to draw a circle here, I want to draw a line here, I want to draw a bunch of lines here, and so on. So the canvas class actually is very important when it comes to what can I draw on the screen, because it gives you the primitives of what you can draw on the screen. So we'll go ahead and take a quick look at what you can draw here. All of those are in draw, they start with draw here. So we have draw A RGB. It fills the entire canvas with something, with a particular color and a particular transparency. Yep.
All these drawing methods, are they based on Java Swing class?
No.
They're not. Okay.
They might be related, but these are independent implementations.
Okay.
Yep. Otherwise, Google would get into big trouble with Oracle. Because the Swing class, if I remember correctly, is authored by Sun, which is now Oracle. So Google cannot just say, oh, we'll just borrow that code. This is independently implemented. They might have similar functionality, but when you look behind the scene, it's not the same code. So we have draw arc, draw bitmap, a whole bunch of versions of draw bitmap depending on the parameter. Draw circle, draw color, which fills up the entire canvas. Draw line, okay, the most basic form, and then we have draw lines, which can draw multiple lines. Draw oval, draw paint, draw picture, and so on. So whatever you want to do inside the view that is custom to your particular application, you can use one of these or many of these draw methods to create what you want to draw. But that's the whole main point of bringing up this particular documentation page, is the canvas class is actually more like a toolbox of things that you can do on the canvas. Is that okay? I mean, because when you think about a canvas, you go to, say, Michael's or one of those art stores, and you ask for a canvas. What does it look like? A canvas.
Blank. It's a blank sheet. Blank.
It's basically a cloth or fabric-based thing that is wrapped around a wooden frame usually, and that's the canvas. You normally do not associate tools with a canvas, but in the case of Android programming, the canvas is a tool bag. Okay, it comes with a bag of tools where you can say, okay, I use this tool to do this on the drawable portion of a canvas. Okay, which brings us to the next point. The next point is the canvas actually does not store the thing that you can paint on. It's actually a bitmap itself. But for all practical purposes, we don't need to get to know the bitmap class, because a canvas usually has that already initialized by the time you get control. So now we return to the view class. We talked about this part, how the view class is the basis of all GUI elements, such as buttons of all kinds, views of all kinds, text editors, and so on. A view can be reactive. In other words, when we go back to the view class, let's see if we can quickly go to a particular kind of method. I suppose I can do this on touch event. Okay, so these are event processing methods provided by the view class. We have on key down, on key up, on trackball event, on-touch event. So these are the ones that are already defined for the view class. So a view, unlike what you think of a view, is actually reactive. It is it is interactive. You can click it, and it knows that it's being clicked on, and it knows where you are clicking on it. So it forms the basis of interactive type of graphical programs, because you can perform interactive logic with just a view itself. Are we doing okay so far? Okay. In this class, go ahead.
So objects drawn on the cam or anything that you draw on the canvas using the canvas class, you can't later manipulate it. A user cannot manipulate those. Like for example, if you draw a circle, could the user manipulate that circle?
No, the user can. Well, okay, that's a good question. The question, let me just repeat it to the microphone so that we have it on record. The question was, if you draw a circle inside a view, can the end user interact with the circle? The answer is yes and no. The answer is no, because that circle has no true representation. In other words, if the user touches on the circle itself, there's no easy way to find out that the end user touched the circle, because the circle itself is not a view by itself. Okay? You can make it that way because views are hierarchical. You can have one view to contain other views, and then you can eventually have one view that is corresponding to the circle. So that way you can actually use the hierarchy of views to find out that the end user just clicked on that circle. But if you don't do that, and you just draw a circle on the screen, that circle is nothing more than a circle in the background. So you can touch it all you want. The main view will get the touch event, and then you have to use your own logic to find out, okay, but what is at that location? Oh, okay, I can see this circle is at that location. So then you can find out, okay, the user just touched on the circle, which is not the best way of doing things. The best way is really to arrange your views in a hierarchical fashion, so that way you have a smaller view that is nested on top of a larger view, and then the smaller view itself is the circle that you want to be in. You want to be able to sense touches, and that's how you can handle that. It sounds really complicated, but when you look at all the methods of view, you can basically add children to a view, and that's how you can create sub-views and put it inside a particular view. Okay. That's a good question, because the answer is kind of yes and no, depending on what else you can do in your application. All right. So with this part here, we have 4 event processing points. So these things are basically where dispatches are going to. If you go back to what we talked about a little bit earlier, when you dispatch a message, it is going to call one of these methods of the appropriate object. Right. Now, how does a view connect to a canvas? That's the question, right? We want to draw on a canvas, but we are presented with the class of a view only. The connection is here. A view object has a built-in canvas object, and as a result, it is a very convenient way to connect the internal representation of a canvas and what is actually displayed on screen, which is represented by a view. So a view is the top level object, where your Android application can directly interact with. But underneath a view, there's a canvas, already allocated. So now the question now is, but how do we get to the canvas? Now that we know a view has a canvas, and that canvas also already has a bitmap under it. So how do we get access to all those things? Well, the answer is the onDraw method of a view. So let's go back to the view documentation, and then this time we'll look for onDraw. Okay. So we have onDraw here, and onDraw, just by the name itself, what kind of a method is this? We have methods that respond to events, right? and they're all on something. This is one of those. So onDraw is actually a method that is responding to a message to the view object to say, hey, you need to redraw yourself. Okay, it can happen after an invalidate that you call within the same application. It can also be called indirectly because while your application is running, the end user flips to another application and then later on comes back to your original application, which means the screen is now overwritten by something else and it needs to redraw whatever was there to begin with, and this method is called. So onDraw is one of the targets where a message can be dispatched to. And this is where you can link your own logic to update a particular view over here. So that really is the key. This is the key to make your own custom drawing in at least 2D and also in 3D too, but in 2D at least you can use this particular hook to implement your own logic of drawing something on screen. All right, well, all this talking is kind of abstract. There are many, many pieces to put together. So what we'll do now is we'll go through an exercise to do it, using Eclipse, so that we can actually see how to get it done inside Eclipse. We started to do this the other day, and then we got a power fail, so that's why we could not quite finish it. For those of you who want to, but I want to get a file that can do this. Well, guess what? I have uploaded a project that already has the code, but I'm going to do the whole thing today, so that it's more interactive and you guys can stop me to ask questions if you need to. But if you want to download it, it's a simple draw example. It's an archive of a folder. So if you download and unzip that folder, it has all the code already, or most of the code that I'll be using today. But today what I'll do is I'm just going to start from scratch. So this way we can just look at the whole thing, the whole process of how to do it. So we'll create a new Android application project, and we'll just call that test draw, because we're testing how to draw something inside the view. And we'll go with the typical name. And I'm going to pick Android 3.0 API 11 as the base one, as a minimum SDK. And we'll take all the defaults, not a problem. And there we go. So now we have a new application, and this is the view. This is the main. This is the main activity of the of this particular application. So the first thing I'll do is to go to advanced, which is kind of ironic because a view is a very basic construct, and yet it is under advanced because unless you're doing some advanced programming, you would not need access to the base view itself. Now I can do this in several ways. I can do this first, or I can go to the source here and just create a new Java class based on the view class. So I can do this part as well. So I would go here and say, within the same package, we'll call this text view, okay? And the superclass, we'll have to pick up the actual view class. So we'll go here and say Android.view is the superclass, and public static void nodes. Constructors from superclass, yes, we do want to do that because last time we had to go through the trouble to reconstruct all the constructors. So this time we can just say, okay, let the tool handle that part, and we click finish. So now we have the three constructors automatically done, whereas last time we had to do some copying and pasting. So this is really just kind of handy. All right, but the most important part is how do we get to draw something into that view? So we want to implement or override the onDraw method. And the onDraw method is a protected method. Of course, I cannot remember the detail. We'll go ahead here. Protected protected void onDraw canvas. Protected void onDraw canvas as a class name of the parameter. And have to import it. There we go. All right. So now we have a place to put all the logic to basically draw whatever you want to draw on this particular view. Okay. Are there any questions at this point regarding this part? No question? Okay. Now remember last time we also said something about paint, okay? So let's go ahead and do something here. Okay, so we'll say, paint, because with most things they can draw, you have to associate a paint with that drawing first. Okay, so we'll say, P is a variable, it is of paint type. This is an easy one to fix. We just have to import paint first from Android graphics, and that error goes away. What is problematic is if I say P is new paint, like that, and then P dot set color, and we can set up a color to be 0x. If you want a white color, it is FF. If you want a red color, it's going to be FF0000 because it's RGB. Yep.
In this context, what does P represent again?
What is what?
What does P represent again in this context?
P is a paint.
Color. It's a color.
Okay. One draws a method where passing parameters are called canvas to it.
Right.
And then
Well, P is going to be used later. Okay, so right now we are not using it yet. But when we use a tool in the canvas to draw something, then the paint is going to be useful because you have to specify what paint are you going to use to draw a circle, to draw a line, and so on. It'll be obvious later. Okay. And we can also set the alpha. So set alpha, which is a number that can go from 0 to 255. 0 means it's completely transparent, and 255 means it's completely opaque. So we'll just pick something that's completely opaque. 0xFF would do the same thing. Right? So now we can go ahead and actually draw something. To draw something, we're going to rely on the canvas because all the draw methods are inside the canvas definition. So we can say draw, and you can see we can draw quite a few different things. We'll draw a circle. Okay, so we'll just pick up draw a circle. CX is the center of the circle. Well, let's go ahead and find out how is the orientation of the screen set up. So we'll pick 0, 0 and see where's the center of the circle. In this case, radius is, the radius of the circle. We'll just pick up 100 here. And then paint is our variable P that we just set up a little bit earlier. Does that answer your question? How the paint is actually used?
I think I get it now.
Okay, all right. So we'll go ahead and save the file here. But right now, okay, now we have a warning here. And let's see what it's complaining about. Okay, let me see if I can display the entire thing. Okay, it is the entire thing. Okay, the error message complains about avoid object allocation during draw layout operations. Pre-allocate and reuse instead. It doesn't quite explain why it is not a good idea to dynamically allocate objects during a draw layout operation. I suspect it has to do with efficiency because this is called a lot. So every time you call a new method and later on we lose track of the reference P, it's going to deallocate it. So that means if you do this every single time that your onDraw method is called, it will cause a lot of memory operations, which also means at some point the Java virtual machine will have to do garbage collection. It's going to slow down the whole thing, and it will just kind of ruin the end user experience. So I suspect that is the reason why we have a warning sign here. It's not an error, okay? It's not red, it's not a cross, which means the program will work. It's just whether it is efficient or not. So let's go ahead and handle this one here and say, well, let's see, let's not do something that is not recommended or recommended not to do.
So,
Yeah, go ahead.
Clarify my understanding. So onDraw is called every time you have a refresh of the screen.
Right. Every time the Android framework thinks that this screen needs to be redrawn, onDraw will be called.
Okay.
And canvas as a parameter would actually mention which part of the canvas needs to be refreshed, just in case you have a really big view and only a small portion needs to be redrawn. You might have specialized logic and say that, oh, 95% of the screen is the same and only this 5% needs to be redrawn. So it gives you the definition of the rectangle in your own view where things are quote unquote invalidated. Then you can just redraw that portion.
And these parameters here are pixels?
They are in
The 100, the radius 100, is that pixel count?
no, they're not in pixels. They're in it's related to the density of your screen, so it will quote unquote look the same, regardless of the device. So if I go back to the documentation, it would say, okay, so we're looking at draw circle. They're all the same. So when you look at draw circle, the x coordinate, it doesn't specify what coordinate system it's using, but I think it is not it's not the actual pixel. In other words, if I have a 1080p device but the screen is only this big, the circle will still look about the same size as a 1080p device that is this big. So they take the density of the display into consideration. All right, so let's go back to the program here. So, okay, according to the recommendation, let's just read the recommendation again. Pre-allocate and reuse instead. Okay, that's the recommendation. So that means, inside this particular subclass of view, I need to have my own private paint object here. So we can just use lowercase paint as the name of the object. And then we need a place to initialize all these private members of this particular class. So I'm going to implement my own initialize method to handle this part. So I'm just going to say paint is new paint. Okay. So now that I have paint as a member of this particular class, I don't need to allocate it inside the subroutine, inside the method anymore, so I can get rid of that p variable. So all of these, this line definitely can go away because the whole idea is to get rid of the new operator inside onDraw. So now I can just say, paint at all the places that referred to the original local variable. So now you can see the warning has just, gone away and, everything is okay. Are there any questions at this point about what I just did? Pre-allocating so that we are not doing any type of new operator when we are inside onDraw. Okay. All right. So we'll go ahead and make this go. But right now, I have the view defined. However, nothing. This application is not using this particular view at all. So if you go to Layout and go to the fragment, you can see that this view is not even used. So what we can do is to go to, I think under, not other, custom, it's called text view. Okay. We saved all already. Oh, there you go. Under custom and library views, now we have my own view object, and we can drag it and put it onto the screen. And it's not there. Duplicate ID already defined. Oh, okay, so I did earlier. Sorry?
Why is it saying there's a duplicate but it's not listing it there?
Already defined. Okay, let's read this message. It's actually putting it into the XML file, but it's not. Okay, let's take a look at the layout. It's using wrap content as the but it has no content. That's the reason why there's a problem, because it has no content. So if I specify the width and the height to be wrap content, then it's not, there's nothing there. So we need to change that first. No pointer exception. The problem is I can't even get to the object that I have just defined. I'm suspecting, even though it's not showing, it's not using relative layout, it's actually, the entire screen. So if I look at this, nope, it's not here either.
There's an exception.
Hmm?
Null pointer exception.
Yeah, the exception is coming from Java itself when it's running Eclipse. It's not coming from running the application.
Did you say?
Hmm? Okay, I just did.
Close that up.
Close it and reopen. Now it's worse. The whole thing just went away. Okay, so apparently they did not fix all the issues. But it's still inside the XML file. This time I only have one. And let's specify not wrap content. Alright, so we want to look up Android layout width and see what we can specify with that option. And it's also aligning itself to be the left of text view 1. Okay, so we can delete this whole thing first and then see if we can just reconstruct it. And okay, so now we have it back. Okay, margin is 19 dp. So get back to here. It's below text view 1. Alright, so we do have wrap content. We have to change wrap content to something else. It's layout width. Okay, we can specify the basic width of the view. This is a required attribute for any view inside of a containing layout manager. Its value must be a dimension such as 12 DIP for a constant width of or one of the following special constants. Maybe a dimensional value it's an attribute, so now we can look this one here and find out what units we can use. Available units are px for pixels, dp for density independent pixels, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of a pixel, because a pixel is a picture element. So this is like a fractional, can be a fractional kind of thing. sp for scaled pixel based on preferred font size, in for inches, for millimeters. Okay, so now we can just go ahead and specify that in those units. All right, so we'll specify layout width to be, let's see, 50 mm would be reasonable. So we'll make this a square. Align left is text view 1 below and margin top. Okay, so let's see. It's still complaining. Avoid using MMS unit. Does not work accurately on
all devices.
on
Use
all
DP
devices.
instead.
Use DP instead. Okay, fine. Save all. And it's still complaining about something. Nope, it's not complaining anymore. And there's no error, except I still cannot see it from the layout of the screen. But will be brave and actually give it a try. There's no telling whether the virtual machine is actually starting or not. Let's check. Yep, it's running. The emulator is running. So I guess it's just being slow. Yep, just being slow. Alright, so it's up. Slide open. And let's just start with nope, it's not displaying the custom screen. Hmm. It's highlighted, but it's not complaining about anything. If all fails, we'll go ahead and try this method instead. Close it and
You ran a different program.
open.
What came up on the emulator was test menu 2.
Oh, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why. Okay, so we have test draw. Do the source. Run it as Android application. Emulator.
It says test.
Unfortunately, test draw has stopped, so it did not run in the first place. Oh, I know why. I made initialize right here.
Oh.
Did I make use of it?
Okay.
Yep.
In
So
the
by the time it
constructor.
got to on draw, paint is still
No.
uninitialized, so there's no
Okay.
object actually allocated to it. Alright, so we just have to call initialize in the constructors everywhere. Alright, so that's
So how do you know which constructor was called?
These are all called by the framework itself.
Yeah.
So depending on how the object is created, any one of these three can be used. If you want to find out which one is actually called, you can put a breakpoint here.
Okay.
So that way you can actually tell, which one is actually called and by whom. So if that's what you want to do, you can do it that way. Okay, so now that we have fixed the program, go ahead and test it again. Uh-oh. Okay, I just saw a whole bunch of error inflating class text view. And it does give me line numbers, but these are all outside of my code. Let's see.
Trace it back to where it was originally pulled?
I think it does. Hiding. Fragment main.xml is still causing problems. So it has to do with resources, layout. It's still complaining about this one. It's 0, 0 is over here. So it does render this correctly. Having a problem getting started, and I can't even see my logcat. Okay, there we go. Class not found. Didn't find class android.view.textView on path. Okay, so it's the path to the class itself is not qualified correctly. It's using the wrong package, basically, because it's trying to load it from TextView from android.view. So let's switch perspective back to the default, and the problem is in the layout file in the XML. It could not find without any qualification, it thinks the text view is inside the package Android.view, which it's not there. Question now is how do I specify my own
Just qualify it right there.
over here? I don't know whether that's how we do it, but let's see if we can try. Okay, doesn't complain, that's good. Source. There's a warning here too.
And for the package, it says default package. What does it mean by default package?
That's a good question, because never did this before. Okay, I just moved it into my own package under test draw. So I don't think this part actually checks anything, because if I have a typo here, it doesn't catch it. But at runtime, it will complain about it. Right, so let's do this. Yeah, we have it working. Except the circle is
Weird
bigger than
circle.
the entire block.
Circle's now square.
Hmm?
The circle's now square.
Well, it's not a square, it's just, it's
Yeah,
a
visually
bigger-
it's a square.
Yeah, visually it's a square because this is the entire view itself. Alright, so we. Right, so we make it 200. Do you guys remember how big of a circle I was drawing?
100.
100? Yeah,
Oh.
that would do it. So I think this one is specifying in DP2, in device independent pixels. Yep. Better. We can actually see a part of the circle. And this is a confirmation too that this screen, when you specify the radius, it is in units of dp also, because this is the actual edge of the view itself.
So 0, 0 is the origin.
0, 0 is upper
Yeah.
right hand corner.
Yeah. Or,
Yep.
Upper left, and it like goes down.
Upper left, yeah, upper left, not upper right. Sorry?
That's what I thought, like, because before it was just showing.
Right. It's showing a rectangle because the circle is bigger than the entire view itself.
So we verified that qualifying the name in the layout fragment view
Mhm.
did work.
Right, it did work. So I think the original problem had to do with I was putting it into the default package. Instead, I should have put it under the my own package. So that was the problem originally. So now under layout, it should display. Go to graphics. Yep. So now it works because it. So now we can put it back here, and then we can see the rest of the circle. But this part, when it shows here as a preview, it is also showing only this much because I think this is a bigger device compared to what we are using.
Here in Nexus 1. Nexus 1 is
It's a larger device.
480 by 800.
Okay, that's much bigger than the device that I was using. time it's kind of at the right place. All right. Any questions? Yep.
Now, filter it so it looks nice.
Sorry?
Filter the edge, but now it looks so it looks nice.
That might have to do with either paint, circle itself. Okay, let's think about what we can do with this circle, because when you go to circle, this is the entire circle. That's all we can do with circle.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever else you want to do, probably has to do with what we can do with paint. So with paint, you can do some of the settings. So whatever you want to do with paint, is going to be done through set something. So we can set paint.
Set anti-aliasing.
Yep, that will stop the jagged edge. So we can set it to true. Go. Save.
Why would that even be a setting?
Why is it not turned on by default?
Yeah. Does anybody want jagged edges?
I think it's a lot faster.
Yeah, the extra processing, and depending on the size of your project.
Yeah, because without okay, do you know what edge smoothing does? Okay, without edge, okay, let's do it one way and then do it the other way, and then what we'll do is we'll magnify the pixels and find out what it looks like with and without anti-aliasing, because only that way you will find out, okay, why would it incur additional processing cost to turning on anti-aliasing? Why is it even a switch? Because if it's free, then why would we turn it off to begin with? That, I think that was your question, right? Okay. So what we'll do is we'll capture this. So let me do a little screen capture here. Screen capture under accessories. Screenshot. There we go. Select the region. This is after it has grayed out. That's okay. Okay, so this is with anti-aliasing. And then we change our program to turn off anti-aliasing. So we just make this false. Rerun the app. And this is without anti-aliasing. So do the same thing. Go to accessories, screenshot. Capture about the same part. Save as without anti-aliasing. All right, so now we can compare these two, and let's use GIMP to take a look, so we can magnify, take a closer look at those pixels. This is our first one, and okay, is that what you expect without anti-aliasing? So we're looking at pixel level already. So when you see the jagged edge, it cannot do it any better than this. Okay, if you do not want to use anti-aliasing. So the next one is to see what anti-aliasing is actually doing by opening up this image. Unfortunately, the background is kind of gray, but we can still see the effect of anti-aliasing. Okay, do you see any differences? You can see that, okay, let me turn my tool. Yeah, you can see that it's using shades of red in this case to smooth out visually what we actually see. In other words, what it's really doing, well, it's tricking your eye, but the way it works is like this. So let's say this is the grid line representing the actual pixels on the screen. So we have really huge pixels in this case, and let's say the arc that we're dealing with is like this. Okay, this is the arc of the circle. Before, it's either 1 or 0. Without anti-aliasing, it's either a 1, which means the entire pixel turns on, or it's an off, the entire pixel turns off. So in the case of this one, it's off because it is just a little bit less than 50% filled with a circle. And then with this one, it is an on because it is more than 50% filled with a circle. Is that making any sense so far? And obviously, anything that's inside of the circle are fully on, and anything that's outside of the circle are fully off. So that's what we're seeing in the previous picture. Actually, this really looks bad, so I'm gonna use a color tool to adjust it.
Brightness contrast.
I like levels. Levels is a really cool tool because you can, in the case of a compression, you can just do it like this. You can slide that one little thing and. Okay, so, but this way it's more obvious, of what we are seeing here. Okay, so if we switch back to the other one, which is this one here, and you just compare, you can see how the two edges are different because one is either on and off, the other one is using shades of red depending on how much is covered. In other words, with this one here, it might be using 40% of full intensity. With this one here, this pixel, because only a small portion is taken up by the red circle. So with this one, it can decide to use, maybe not 40%, maybe in this case it's a 15%. So that's how it can smooth out the appearance of the edge by controlling the shades of color in order to make it look smoother. Is that making any sense? And it consumes processing power because now instead of just saying, okay, is it mostly on or mostly off and turn it on or turn it off, now it has to compute how much of the circle is inside this pixel and how much is outside of the circle in order to determine what color should be rendered on this one single pixel.
Yeah, I've seen that in games and stuff. They'll give you the option of turning on anti-aliasing on
Right.
and off, depending on like your graphics card or whatever. It will run smoother.
Right. So it can affect your frame rate if you have a graphics card that is not capable. Then and you turn on all the features, including anti-aliasing. So the picture would look better, but then it will be your frame rate will go down because it takes more time to render one particular scene. And it's the same thing here. That's why there's a switch to allow you to turn it off in case you have your Android device is not capable and you don't want to waste time on anti-aliasing. So that was a good question. Okay, why is there even a switch? It has to do with the processing power needed in order to implement anti-aliasing. Which version of Windows started to offer anti-aliasing as an option?
98.
Was it 98?
I don't know.
I remember it was a pretty late version. I think it's around 98 or 2000 when Windows started to offer anti-aliasing as an option. NT 4.0, was
I know
one,
XP has font anti-aliasing.
but it started before XP.
Yeah.
So it could be 98 or 98 second edition that
Maybe
they
it was
started to
ME.
offer that. No.
ME.
No, it was not ME. ME did not put anything new on the table. Did not bring anything new at all. All right. All right, so most of our trouble today was because I put text view outside of my own package, and the tool when I tried to use it, did not pick it up that is outside of my own package, and inside the resource file, inside the layout file, it did not use the proper qualification of the entire path to that particular package. So that was what's causing the problem.
If you were to remove the qualification right now, would it recognize the packet? Recognize it?
I would imagine not, because this is supposed to be. I guess one way to find out. Okay, so go back to the main activity, run it. Yep, that's the problem. Because what happens is this file or this XML file is actually read by the Android framework. So when the Android framework is starting up your application and creating this particular activity, it's using this XML file to look up the proper compiled Java files inside your application and call the right methods to construct it. So if this is wrong, then it will give you the runtime error and say that we cannot do it. But it's interesting how it is not caught by the tool itself. The tool just says, okay, you can put whatever you want here, and we're not going to check. And the last one is test draw, I think. There we go. Save it. Make sure that this is fixing the problem. Oh, I was in the wrong thing. Yep, that fixed the problem. All right. Any additional questions? What about the interactive part? Didn't I say that this is all interactive, or it's supposed to be interactive? So let's see what happens when I click on something. Okay. So we can go back to text view, and this time we can override the. I had it open on the other window. Inside view, we have. Event processing. So we have on-touch event, as a method. Implement this method to handle touch screen motion event. If this method is used to detect click action, it's recommended that actions be performed by implementing and calling perform click. This will ensure consistent system behavior, including da 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 da. Okay. All right. So we have to click on perform click. Call this view's on click listener if it is defined. Perform all normal actions associated with clicking, reporting accessibility event, playing a sound, and so on. All right. So does everybody understand what this means? What it's saying? What do you think on-touch event is going to report, or when it is even triggered? If I just want my screen to respond to a click, okay, like click, and my hand just turned out to move a little bit, sliding a little bit, okay? How many events do you think on-touch event will trigger? I'll give you several options. 0, 1, or many. That's a loaded question. Yes, the answer is many. So that means, in your logic, you will have to figure out, okay, when is it touchdown, and what is irrelevant because you're just sliding your finger a little bit, and when is it off? Okay. But on the other hand, if you perform click, okay, if you implement this method, but you call perform click instead, perform click is going to use its own logic to basically say, okay, we're not going to do anything special when after you touch the screen and you're just moving around a little bit. It will only get triggered when you release your hand. Then it will actually call the on-click listener method that is associated with this view. In other words, it turns it does not handle the sliding motion anymore. It just turns it into a click, which is how buttons work. Is that making any sense? Okay. So we'll go ahead and do it this way, because otherwise we'll end up with a lot of events, which is okay. But the first thing we have to do is to go to on-touch event and handle that. The parameter is motion event as a class. And when you look at motion event as a parameter, as a class, it gives you a lot of information. And we'll scroll down to, okay, that's a really big class too. Okay, it will give you a lot of things. Return the kind of action being performed. In other words, are we starting to touch? Are we moving while it is touched, or are we releasing a touch? So all of that stuff you will have to process if you want to, just handle on-touch event. On the other hand, if you want to just, say, okay, but I just really care about, whether somebody is touching it, just clicking it, then, using this method is better. And they put this text here, because too many people are trying to use on-touch event itself, and use it as if it's a click. And that's why they put in this information here and say, okay, if a click is all that you want to process, use perform click, but then you also have to do something else, because if you use perform click, you also need to give this particular view a on click listener, set it up in order for the click to be processed. If you do not want to do it that way, then you can do it in an on touch event. Are there any questions about this part? No questions? What if you want to drag the circle around? You want to touch on it and then you want to drag it around? Then do you still want to do the perform click or not? Probably not, because perform click will combine all of those motions into one single event. When you release your hand, then it registers one click. So if you want to slide something, or if you wanted to capture your sliding, then you want to process this event itself without using perform click. Okay. We'll go ahead and just process this event, and so it's override public Boolean on touch event. Public Boolean on touch event, and it has a motion event. All right, so we have to import motion event. Okay. And we must return a result of type Boolean. I thought I did that. Save. Oh, okay. If you're actually doing the processing, you have to return true, because if you return false, that means the event is not handled by your own event handler, and then the system will do something else, because it's assuming that the event is not handled. It will go back to the default handler of the system. So if you return true, that you're basically telling the Android framework and say that I got it, okay, it's handled. You'll consider it done. Because if you return false, that means, okay, I don't know how to handle this one, or in this context, I don't know how to handle it, and then we'll go back to the Android system, and then we'll try to figure out some other ways to handle the event.
Is that in addition to?
In addition to?
Yeah.
It can be in addition to.
Because
in other words, you can do your own processing and still return false, and then let the system to do some additional work. Is that what you were asking?
Yeah, I was just thinking of whatever. Everything that's done is like queued, and it waits for a return true or false to actually perform those tests.
Yep. Okay. Now here's the thing. If I want to draw the circle and drag it around using my touch event, now I have a little bit of a problem. Okay. Let's take a look at what motion event can do. So this is motion event M, and it has all these methods. Okay. I have no problem getting the historical x, historical y, and I can just get raw x, get raw y. Those are, I think, non-translated x and y coordinates in the system. So I can get all this information, no problem. But how do I draw the circle in here? That's the question.
For example, if we're just moving the center, right, then I would think we need to use somehow global variables within that class for the center of the circle.
Okay.
And then in the ondraw, use those global variables for the ordinal.
Exactly. So you want to do it inside onDraw, but not here.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the whole concept is the canvas, which is passed here, is not passed to onTouch event. OnTouch event has no access to the canvas object that you need in order to draw something. Okay? And this is also the wrong place to draw something too, because whatever you want to draw in here is not going to be reflected until the next time the loop goes around to post that, okay, we need to redraw something now. Okay? All right, so let's go ahead and just remember the x and y coordinate here by adding more private variables here. So now we have private float. Okay, so we have to remember the center x and center y of the circle, and we'll just go ahead and get those information here. Cx and get m dot get we have get x and get y. So get x, and then cy is m dot get y. All right. So we have the coordinates gotten here, and now with onDraw we have to make use of that information, which also means inside initialize we'll have to initialize cx to something. So we can initialize cx to 0, cy to 0 as well, and then inside onDraw, instead of fixing the coordinate to be just 0 and 0, we can now refer to cx and cy in here. Is that making any sense? Does everybody see the connection between onTouch event, which is called when you touch on the view itself, and also onDraw, which is the method that is called when it's time to redraw the view itself? Okay, so this is the connection, except there's still a missing connection here. I'm passing the information along, but I'm not triggering the operation. Okay, but let's do it this way first, so that it is obvious, of what the problem is, and then we'll go ahead and fix that problem. All right, so this is the new application, and I'm dragging here, and nothing happens. You can see the circle is not moved even slightly. That has to do with there's no triggering of the onDraw method. Once the circle or once the view is painted and drawn, it just says, okay, I'm done. Okay, so how can we make sure that that really is the case? Okay, how do we make sure that this is not another problem? But what we can do is we can go back to home, and I was about to start something else, and then we can come back to that screen. That's not the way to do it. One time. Activity not started. Its current task has been brought to the front. Okay, there we go. So now we can go back to here, and you can see the circle has now moved, because it's using the cx and cy that has been updated already when I went back to the home and then come back to this application. Okay, I'm going to click here. I will move the center of the circle all the way over here. So when I click it, nothing happens because it's not triggering the onDraw method to be executed. But when I use a different mechanism to go to the browser, okay, that's better, and then use this mechanism to go back to testDraw, you can see that now it's updated. Because when I go to another activity and then come back to this activity, it's basically saying, oh, you just lost your screen. You have to redraw everything in this activity, and it's calling onDraw right at that point. And that's how it got redrawn. So how do you make it so that when you drag your mouse pointer around, the circle will follow it? No, you don't want to call onDraw. onDraw, should be called only by the system framework.
OnDrag.
OnDrag, nope. OnDrag has the same problem because it's still you're interpreting the input event, you're updating the XY coordinate of where the circle is supposed to be, but you're not triggering the onDraw thing to actually put it on screen. Invalidate. So what we want to do is invalidate. Basically, what invalidate does is to send a message from your application to itself and say, okay, note to self, time to redraw the screen. Okay? So let's see if that fixes the problem. So we'll go to text view. So after we set these things, we just call invalidate. Invalidate is a method of a view. Okay. So go ahead and run the application again. Switch back to here, and this time you can see that the circle is following the drag. Okay, but this is interesting because what is happening here is your application is constantly sending a message to itself. Okay, so let's take a look at what is happening when I drag the mouse around. Okay. When I drag the mouse around, okay, this is your app. Okay, at some point, like right now, it is sitting here waiting for something to happen because nothing is happening. The Android framework is not sending your application any message. So as soon as I touch it, start to drag it, the Android framework is coming here and say, oh, okay, this is tag. Okay, finger down. Okay, so my finger putting down is triggering the Android framework to generate the initial message, and the initial message gets sent to the application. So the application, which is test draw, will do some processing here, okay, to capture the CX, to capture CY, okay, and then what it's going to do? Invalidate, right? So what invalidate does is to send a message back to the application itself and say, note to self, when I get around to it, redraw this particular view. Is that making any sense? So this thing is actually quote unquote sending a message back to itself. So that's why when it's done processing the finger down event, the message queue is not empty. It's still not empty because I just sent a message to myself. So the second time it gets the message out of the message queue, this is the time when it redraw the circle to the new position. And then it just sits around doing nothing. Okay, so it sits around to do nothing until I move my finger a little bit on the screen. So when I move my finger a little bit on the screen, the system, the Android system framework captures that particular hardware event, translate that into a message, and send that message to the application and say, you know what, you got a new message now. The coordinate has changed. The finger is still down, the touch is still down, and but the location has now changed. So it is that time when your application receives that message, gets dispatched to on-touch event. Inside on-touch event, I do my little bit of a processing, which is just remembering CXCY, and also sending a message to myself, which is invalidate. So invalidate is actually sending a message back to the same view, or back to the same application, I should say, to say that note to self, this particular object, this view, needs to repaint itself. And that's when I do the actual processing to redraw the circle to a different position. And then after that, I can wait again for the next event to happen. So is everybody seeing how this whole thing works? Sort of?
Sure.
Sure. But there's no easy way to turn this into a game. In other words, if you think about it, how can I turn this into a game where the circle is moving by itself and I need to click as close to the center of the circle as possible? If I want to turn it into a game like that, I would have to use, first of all, some kind of timing mechanism, so that without me touching anything on the screen, something will still be sending a message to the application and say, hey, you know what, it's time to update the screen position or update the position of the circle. Okay. Are there any questions about that particular aspect? If I want to turn this into a game where the circle moves by itself, I would have to have some kind of logic to trigger that logic periodically, because I'm not touching the screen. Nothing is actually sending a message to the application. So you will have to set up a timer event in order to make that happen, which is very cumbersome. Okay, when the logic of the game gets complicated, this gets very complicated, because you cannot spend all the time to update or think about how to update the circle, because what if I click on the screen while it is figuring out the next location of the circle? It cannot process my touch event. It has to finish whatever it was doing before it can process my touch event, because it is using a single thread. If that thread is being used to calculate the location of the new circle, it cannot be used to handle my touch event. So that's why with complicated games you will need one main thread for the user interface, but you typically have worker threads to update portions of the screen at the same time. And that's when you need a new class. We will not talk about it today, but we will eventually talk about it. It's called a surface view. So when you look up a surface view in Android, that is eventually what we need to talk about if we want to write games. Because if you just read the class overview here, it provides a dedicated drawing surface embedded inside of a view hierarchy. You can control the format of this surface, and if you like, its size. The surface view takes care of placing the surface at the correct location on the screen. Blah, 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 blah. But the whole point of a surface view is it allows, right here, one of the purposes of this class is to provide a surface in which a secondary thread can render onto the screen, into the screen. If you're going to use it this way, you need to be aware of some threading semantics. So that's why we will kind of talk about this, but later on, because we first have to talk about threading first, which is going to be helpful also, because if you want to think about, I don't want to implement an application. What if I want to implement something that is sitting in the background, and do some processing in the background or waiting for something to happen, but it does not necessarily have a front end. We'll basically have to talk about processes, and then talk about threads, and then we can come back to talk about surface views, so that you can kind of put everything together. That will make it a very good second project. We'll make Flappy Bird. The entire class will write Flappy Bird. We'll all become millionaires soon. If you don't like Flappy Bird, you can have a Flappy Turtle, so it's underwater. Yeah. So instead of birds and other things, you have piranhas coming after your turtle and stuff.
I got a better one. At the beginning of the level, there's a kid that has a turtle in his hand, and he just chucks it across the screen. Your job is to keep it flying.
And they can upgrade to hand gliders and
Yes.
blimps and other things. Well, I just gave you guys, a $1 million idea.
Flappy Turtle.
Not Flappy Turtle, Flying Turtle. Flying pigs, that's it, flying pigs.
Filing the patent application now.
I mean, the world is just waiting for that app, man. I mean, they're just waiting for it. I probably should erase that part from my recording. Otherwise, there'll be like tons of people working on it at the same time. The next time we meet on Wednesday, there'll be like 200 apps popping up. It's like, wow. Nah, that won't happen. Nobody listens to me, even people who are supposed to.
What'd you say?
Good one, Eric. Good one. All right. So, are there any questions about today's lecture? I apologize for the snafu about putting my package in the wrong, putting my class into the wrong package, and the tool did not catch it. It just go like, okay, here's the class, but where is it? It cannot be found.
Was it the process of creating the package? It just sort of just stuck it there.
When I created the class, there's an option
Class.
of which package am I supposed to use, and I left it empty,
Oh.
and then the GUI, basically said, okay, if you leave it empty, we have a default package, wherever it is, but there's really no such thing as a default package, when you think about it. I mean, every package needs to be somewhere. So when I actually specify that class, when I put it into the fragment, it just say, okay, if you say it's here, I trust you, and just create the XML file accordingly, which broke the tool itself. Yep.
I wonder what the package name would be inside the class.
Well, let's find out. Let's create another one, and see what it does. So we'll create another new class, And package is already, something here, but last time there was nothing there.
But maybe because since you clicked on a package to create one, or inside a package,
Okay.
so maybe like just click on the project name.
Okay, like that one.
No, further,
Right here.
and a source.
Oh, here.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it should be able to do it, from any place. Okay, so now it doesn't have a package, and it says, default. So we'll go ahead and test it. Okay. So where am I? Okay, so it says it's inside default and has no
Yeah.
destination of the package, which is the problem because now it doesn't, we don't exactly know where it is. All right, so we can get rid of this one, delete. Yep. So it's always a good idea to have the right thing clicked before you say create class, or in the process of create class, tell exactly where the package is supposed to be. All right.
So the simple draw example is exactly this example?
Similar, yeah.
Similar.
It's almost exactly the same, but the process is a little bit different. So the way I created the view is just using drag and drop. So I did not use alignment width and alignment height to define the size of the view itself, whereas this time I explicitly use a dimension on it. All right. Any other questions? How do I put an on-click listener object and associate it with a particular view? We did that already.
So what was the question?
Okay, the question was, how do we associate a on-click listener object to a particular view, like text view in this case? So if I do it the way that the documentation does and use perform click, is it perform click? Or process click, I cannot remember. Yeah. So if I want on touch event to call perform click, which will eventually call use the on click listener to process the click itself. Do you guys still remember how to associate a on click listener object to a particular view? That we have done many times,
Yeah, just
in the on create.
to find a ID by.
Yep, that's exactly how you do it. So that means, with a particular, with a custom view, you can easily process, clicks. But I'm not sure when you process a click like that, whether it will tell you where the click is. The on-click listener, the parameter to an on-click listener, does it give you the location of the click event itself?
If it transfers the event, then that object should contain that information.
Okay, on-click, no, it does not, because it gives you an object of a view. So it just tells you which view is being clicked on, but it doesn't tell you where it's clicked on, which is the whole idea of a click is, you don't really care where, because if you think about it, with a normal button on the screen, do you care where on the button, the click is? You don't.
Not necessarily.
Right. So if you want to know the location, you will also have to remember the location inside the on-touch event itself, and then combining that with the on-click method inside a on-click listener object, then you know that it's clicked and also where it's clicked. It's kind of like, still capturing CX and CY, but you call perform click instead of drawing the circle. Is that making any sense? Sort of?
Sure.
All right. Well, okay. Do you guys want to see how I can change this program so that the circle is not dragged around when I keep clicking it or keep the mouse button down, but it will do one update when I let it go? So it's actually using the on-click method. let's change the program just to do that, okay? Because I do want to show you guys, how to combine the two methods. So in here, instead of invalidating here to begin with, so I'm going to comment out or get rid of invalidate here. Instead, I will call perform click, which is implemented by the view itself. Okay, so there's nothing to really implement here by me. But then I will have to go to main activity itself, and inside on create we have to do what we have done in the past already, which is get view by ID. Find view, not get view. So find view by ID. I cannot remember the name of the. Okay, here's a quick question. Which class should I look up here? I'm trying to find out what is the name of the method to find a view by its ID. The question is, is a method of which class? It's activity. And I'm gonna find view by ID. Find view by ID is the name of the method. So find view by ID. Did I misspell something? And this one is tax view 1. All right.
Tax uppercase.
Oh, is it? No.
At the end. That's at the end. Tax
I think
view.
the whole thing is all lowercase.
Or
I think it's tax view.
Oh, that's tax. The whole thing in uppercase? Nope. It's lowercase tag, uppercase view 1 dot set on click listener. And then and now we have to give it a inline definition of a on click listener. Import. And then in here we have to implement the on click method. Question is, it's supposed to return anything.
Is it inline definition basically just a definition?
It's-
That acts as a parameter.
I used the wrong term. It should be called a anonymous class definition. But it's kind of like you're defining a class in line with whatever is actually making use of the class. So the proper name is called an anonymous class because there's no name associated with that class.
And what was the inline?
Hmm?
What was the inline definition again?
That was just my way of referring to the same thing. Okay, so onClick has a view. It has no return type. All right, so let's go back here. So it's void onClick view v as a parameter. All right. So here with this onClick method, change method to public. All right. So in here, I want to redraw that particular view. Okay, so what should I do here? And you validate invalidate is undefined for view dot on click listener. That's an easy way to do this. I know exactly who to invalidate, so we can do it also by find view by ID r dot ID dot text view 1. And we'll say, you invalidate yourself.
You're no longer temp.
All right, so I think that should be it. Okay, we have done all the modifications needed in order to not redraw the circle during the drag, but when I release it, to actually cause the click event to happen, then it should redraw itself. Yep, go ahead.
What's passing the view when you?
Oh yeah, you can use the view itself.
The
Yep, because that's the view that is being modified. Thank you. There we go. Much better. This is actually more reason for you to believe that I do have a PhD.
Oh, I guess so.
Yeah. Alright. Oh, I forgot to.
Are you still recording?
I'm still recording. Okay. Here, test draw has stopped. No. Okay.
See, I wanna put in each one of my emulators the sound that every time an app crashes like that, it plays that sound.
I thought they used to have that.
Sound?
Yeah, I just got it, and I just.
Okay, these are just warnings. Don't think they're causing the issue.
It was working fine,
Did you?
It's always a plus.
Can you extend the homework out till Thursday or till Monday?
Huh?
Can you extend the homework out till Monday?
Next Monday?
Yeah.
This is Monday.
Next Monday. Please?
Let me fix this first.
Is that a yes?
No.
Damn.
Yeah. Okay, where's my...
Do you have new office
I
hours?
was
Hmm?
Do you have new
Well,
office hours?
I was, but this weekend I
I'll be in my office until maybe 1 o'clock or so today.
But
taking care of my
last
girlfriend,
Thursday,
'cause
and then I
she's
saw
on
Carol, and she said that you got a new class, so your office hours changed. Or you picked up a class or something.
Right, because I have a class starting at 5:20 on Tuesdays and Thursdays now. So I come in about maybe 40 minutes before that, so you can still catch me, but it has to be earlier.
But the other days are still the same on your schedule?
Hmm?
The other days are still the same on your schedule?
My
Your
schedule
office
is kind of out of date. Yep.
Okay. So it's pointless.
All right, it's not working. It's not working when I think it should be.
Yeah, no problem.
The only way I changed it that can cause it not to happen.
Doesn't have anything on my laptop.
Paint is still initialized. CX and CY is still initialized.
do you have to
So the
import
only-
anything to get that to work?
Hmm?
Do you have to import anything to get it to work?
Import anything?
Weren't you trying to get the,
Well, there's no compile time error.
What
There's
was
one.
the error message again?
It just said, application closed. It did not give me a logcat window. So there's nothing generated because last time the logcat gave me a lot of error messages, and that's how we found out what happened last time. So I think it is having a problem here when I create on-click listener, it's either this one, put a breakpoint here, or when it's actually getting a click, which is down here. Alright, so let's go ahead and debug it. Debug, test roll. Okay, so we are stopping in on create on this line. So far so good, no problem. And we'll step over. Aha. Okay, now we want to look up the call stack, which is here. Okay, perform launch activity. It's out of my methods already, but it's throwing an exception of instrumentation on exception, unable to start activity. Okay, now it's done. So it has to do with when we are on create. Let's do it one more time. Okay, now we're inside on create after we call the superclass on create method. After we handle all this stuff, so by this time everything should be initialized on the screen. So find view by ID. New on-click listener. We don't have a chance to get to anything else. I mean, it crashed before the view, before the activity gets rendered.
So it crashes before it ever goes to the on-click listener?
Yep.
What? What's the value of tax view at that point?
So that's this is all the crap that has to happen when it's looking up the ID. And you can see how it's getting there, you know, because my activity, my own class, you know, calls find view by ID, and then it goes to the parent class, you know, inside on create it calls find view by ID, but it's actually using the parent class for the superclasses method, which is the activity class own find view by ID. So if I want to kind of fast track this, I can just resume execution, but that will just kind of break it. It will just get to the point where it doesn't work anymore. Nope. It gets back to here, set on click listener. And if I step over, it's catching the exception. So it is that particular method causing the problem.
Can you step backward?
Nope, this is not a trace. Can't do that. All right, so let's go back to the source code view. It's getting stuck here. This is the place where it, you know, where it has a problem.
Is it complaining about find view by ID, or is it the set?
It's the set on click listener. The find view by ID return without any problem. It's the second time that we get out.
Question.
Yep.
Do you specify as a view?
A
Right
view
now
is
you-
okay.
Right now you're just saying find ID by view, but are you saying that this?
You've been casting it to tax view.
Yeah.
That should not be necessary because I am a
Or cast it
subclass.
as a view.
But tax class text view is a subclass of a normal view. So that should not really matter. Okay, well, let's see if we can fix that by casting first. So we can cast it as a text view so that it's referring to my particular class. But my class doesn't have its own set on click listener. It's just using the superclass's own set on click listener. So that should not really matter. And I'm not having my own, invalidate. So inside here, everything should be okay because, my view is just a normal view from that perspective.
Then what would happen if you comment out the invalidate? So it's just not
I don't
doing
think
anything.
I don't think it ever gets to there because this is defining the on-click method of the anonymous class, and I don't get a chance to get to the anonymous. I don't get a chance to execute a method inside the anonymous class at all.
It fails at set on click listener.
Yeah.
That part of the line, not before that. Did you install KVM whenever you fixed your ISO?
Hmm?
Did you reinstall everything when you fixed your ISO?
Yeah. Yeah, so it is this call that's causing problem because I don't get a chance to go anywhere else.
What would happen if you just comment that whole section out?
This whole section.
Yeah. The entire.
We can do it like this. So this way it's still here, but it's not active. Alright, this is not C. It's more picky. It's gonna warn because it's a.
It's like this will never have to skip.
Yeah, but that's the whole idea. Fine.
Lightning speed for that emulator.
There we go. So it is this call here. I can click all I want. I mean, that's not a problem. It's this guy, that is the problem because it's for whatever reason it can find the view by ID. It returned okay from that, or maybe it did not. It depends on what it is actually returning. Maybe it returned a null value because it cannot find it.
Could we just do?
Use an intermediate variable.
Yeah, or I'm just trying to. So what happens when you step through? You just crash right at that line?
It crashes, inside, somewhere inside on click listener. Set on click listener, it crashed. Okay, so we'll turn this to true. So we reactivate this code here.
It was just failing to set a listener for your custom view.
Hmm?
Maybe it's just failing to create an on-click listener for your
I think
custom
it's
view.
failing to find the view itself. Okay, so all right. So what we can do is to say view
So you can see what value it returns.
Yep. Okay, so we'll set my view to be this call here, and then on the second line we'll say my view dot set click listener blah blah blah. So we still have our breakpoint on the first statement, which is good. Save it and debug it.
Damn moss in my code. All these damn moss in my code.
Yeah, what?
Moss.
Moss. Moss. All right. So we are now at this point, and my view is.
You may have to step past it.
Yeah. So let's step over.
Oh, yeah. So now
Okay.
it should have a value.
Yep,
No.
it's no. It could not find it. It could not find tax view 1.
Could we take a look at the resource?
Yep. So let's switch our view back to Java and then look at layout fragment main. And it's called tax view 1. So there's a problem associating text view 1 with that resource. Alright, so let's look at, I think it's under values. Yep. Where are the IDs located?
It may have to do with how you specified the qualification of the name.
Qualification of the name.
Yeah. The if it's already registered in ID, it shouldn't be an issue.
Good. Under ID.
So text view 1 is defined here. It has a particular ID.
Yeah.
That's all. You should be able to locate it.
Did you type it correctly?
Yeah.
Well, if I did not type it correctly, it would have been a compile time error because it's the wrong name. So it got the right ID, but it could not find it.
What's the value supposed to be in text view? What?
It's just for return a reference, but now it's just returning a null.
Yep.
Reference to what?
So it's returning null because that thing has not been created yet at that point. But I thought, okay, unless I put that code into the wrong place inside the methods. No, it is the right place. This is on create. It's the right place to set up the on click listener. Because we have done this many times before.
I've had a problem yesterday where the app kept crashing. That's why we started Flip.
Okay, let's see if that helps.
All right.
Somehow I don't think that's the issue because otherwise it would not compile either.
Is Eclipse buggy?
What do you think? I don't think it's not Eclipse itself, it's ADT as a plugin.
I
That
think
is
it's
problematic.
the version of Eclipse too, though.
It's older.
Yeah.
Yep.
Are you using the one from the SID repository? Or are you using the one that comes with the SDK?
This is the one that comes with the SDK.
Yeah, that one's like 3.6. They're on 4.3.
But sometimes a newer version simply means it has more new features, not necessarily less stable. Alright, so let's do it again. Source, go to
People are saying that you should maybe calling it too early. Wait until on finish inflate.
But then what about all the other programs that we have done so far that called it at this point?
Well, they were slightly simpler, probably.
Because those are not custom classes.
Right.
So you said on finish.
Yeah, on finish inflate.
On inflate. I cannot find that method here inside the view class. Oh, okay. Right. Wrong page. On finish inflate. Okay. Finalize inflating a view from XML. This is called as the last phase of inflation after all child views have been added. That makes sense.
So in other words, it called like after all the other views have been initialized or whatever.
Yeah, but the protected void on finish inflate. Or as a parameter? No, it's not.
And you just got to copy your stuff in there.
On finish inflate, and this is inside the view class. Oh, this is a view class too. It's not. This is not the activity class. So that means, the association of the on-click listener has to be done inside the view class itself, and it cannot be attached, to the activity. This is inside the activity, main activity, inside onCreate. And it's already calling the onCreate of the superclass first. That should create all of the view objects already. So that's a little bit strange here. This is going like, oh, okay. Well, if you need to go, I know you have to go a little bit early.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and put it here, stash it.
Oh, how does that work?
Yeah, what about my question I asked you earlier, though?
You need until next Monday?
Yeah, you should extend it out.
How many people can use some extra time for the homework assignment?
I can use that.
Come on, H2O?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can use extra time.
Just like
Yeah.
after
All right. Well, you guys can turn it in, a little bit later.
Thanks, Dad.
As long as we.
But that means I'm gonna compile more stuff, on top of it too.
No, the thing you mentioned today, I wanna add, the.
Oh, you want to incorporate some of the new
Yeah,
stuff in it?
Yeah.
So you can actually have it displaying on top paper. Say, well, you guys are doing H2O, so you can have ice display on the screen.
Yeah. That, I have like cool graphics I wanna put out of it.
All right. So let's see. I don't really need my view anymore.
But for H2O, did you ever go over how the user interacts with the program?
How do what?
How does the user interact with the H2O program?
How does it interact?
You could, yeah,
You can use
put
buttons.
the counter
Yeah, it's really up to the
earlier.
programmer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
For this one.
You could
Yep.
use the-
You guys can use whatever you want to do it.
drag thing, or
Oh.
anything you want.
You can make it as simple as just two buttons, right? Increment temperature, decrement temperature,
It's the
to a
counter.
slider, to a text box, whatever you want to do.
The counter thing you showed us earlier
Hmm?
this semester, I was gonna implement that in there.
Okay.
But then you mentioned we could use like dials and the bar, and like, wow, those are cool.
Buttons on your headset.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it one more time. It's launching.
Can't.
Like you're pulling up, you're pulling up
Wait.
the emulator.
Okay.
So is it working?
No.
You're not?
No.
Well, it's sort of working,
Virtual
but it's
machine
not really a
online,
click
yeah.
anymore.
Okay.
What's
I
this
thought
little
you pulled it up.
finishing thing?
It's supposed to try with perform
No,
click.
this is just.
It's supposed to
your
translate
type of
into a single
access
click,
on your own.
but that's not what it's doing.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not what the.
Okay.
Oh, you know
But,
what?
Hold on,
Maybe I should return false here.
It wouldn't update my clip.
Just guessing.
Let me just get out of here. What I had to do was I got the old version of Eclipse. and
So did it work?
The old
Yep.
version of
Oh,
the
cool.
viewer, but
Yep.
the one.
Because as I said, you have to kind of tell it that nope, I did not know how to process this, because otherwise it's convinced that I did actually process it, and I think the fact that I return and say that I did process it, cause it to redraw the screen. So the invalidate is automatic if I say yes, I did process it, which doesn't make any sense. But it's working now. It's
No.
I can drag my pointer all over the place. It doesn't do anything until I release it, or if I release it within a certain coordinate, then it works. But if I release it too far away, it doesn't work. It's the down click that works actually. It's not the let up. It's actually the initial click that works.
If you're having difficulty, I would just.
All right.
Worst part is always like,
I would
you
just
don't know why it
delete
works.
the